This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world, happenings in politics, in international news, in technology, in media, everything that we interact with throughout the course of our day and our week, everything that we are exposed to through our new forms of media, our ever-increasing, it seems, exposure to these things, either through our tablets or smartphones or through our social media or the 24-hour news networks or even just the old-fashioned radio in the car. Whatever it is that we interact with during the course of our week, the stories that we are telling ourselves about ourselves, and we take a step back and we look at it from a higher perspective. And that higher perspective can give us meaning, empowerment, but most certainly takes the stress out of what can be a feeling of being overwhelmed. We have so much media now. We have so much information coming at us, most of which is either in one way or another toxic, or simply unnecessary, or calculated in a way as to grab your attention, but not in a good way, to make you feel compelled to be angry or afraid or scared, or sometimes, the opposite direction. Comforted, perhaps a little, I won't say inspired, because not much of it is inspiring, but in some way or another way of pushing your buttons and getting you to pay attention is by making you feel a little good about yourself, right? Without really doing much to help, but making you feel a little good about yourself. Giving you some information that, might make you feel a little bit happy, and then throwing the negativity right back at you. Anyway, in taking that step back, that all-important step back, and looking at the stories that we are creating, we are able to empower ourselves, enrich ourselves, and take the energy back from the stories we are actually creating, and create a new story, at the very least. But at the most, we are expanding and we are connecting to the highest levels of ourselves, the most that we are, the greatest that we are, which is an interconnected oneness, a divine mind, if you will. I come from a metaphysical perspective, so my perspective is that we exist on multiple levels, and at the highest level of our being, we are infinite, connected, and creating everything in our world. Those things that we see as being outside forces are really ourselves in another form. We are creating the circumstances, we're creating the games that we are involved in playing in our everyday lives. And I call them games not to dismiss them as being unimportant. Obviously, the sense of reality that you get from them is very palpable. It should be. That's part of the creation. It's no fun to be involved in something that doesn't feel real. If you can just toss it aside as being an illusion easily, it takes the attention away, it takes the fun away, I guess, from it. But often, because we are so focused on things that are not the ultimate truth of who we are, because we're so focused on these things, we lose sight of the greater power of what we have, the greater connection that we have. Now, many people who consider themselves to be spiritual seekers and find themselves kind of maybe overwhelmed or pulled down in a way by what comes across in the news media. Many of them try to say, okay, I'm going to disconnect from all of these forms of media. I'm not going to engage in them at all. And I think that's a good idea. I think absolutely part of your week ought to be, and even part of your day ought to be, technology free, media free, and just alone time with you, or whatever it is that you would enjoy doing. Meditation works well. I'm a big proponent of that. I'm always talking about that on this show. But walks in nature, working out, of course, that's a very healthy thing. Or just doing nothing except disconnecting from phones, TV, all forms of media. I think that's an important part of anybody's day and an important part of anybody's week. However, to completely disconnect yourself from it, as many people are interested in doing, the spiritual seekers that I'm talking about, to do that, unless you're willing to live on a mountaintop and off the grid, which most people aren't, it's probably not going to work for very long. Eventually you're going to be exposed to these things. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You just need the tools to use to deal with it. In fact, when you disconnect yourself from these things that bring up feelings of discomfort or concern, you're actually kind of tossing aside an amazing opportunity. And that opportunity is to go into those situations, into those stories, into those feelings, and be mindful about them without judgment. That's what mindfulness is, but to be aware of how powerful they may feel. And then when it just feels like it might be getting a little too overwhelming, you stop and you reframe and you tell yourself the truth of what's really going on. And that truth is, this is a creation. This is an illusion. A very, very detailed, well-constructed, powerful illusion that I've created to bring out these feelings in myself, to explore this idea, to play this, for want of a better word, holographic game, and be very involved. And then ultimately to transcend it and remember the truth of who I am. If you can accept in a mindful way those things going on around you as things being created for you to explore, for your personal growth, for your good, even though they don't seem that way, even though they might appear to be the opposite, that is what you are doing. And when you reach that level, and meditation is a good way to reach that, then you have that higher perspective that helps you change how you see things. Our show today is a continuation of what we did before the Easter break, which was to talk a little bit about Earth Day. And I'm going to talk about the Gaia effect because it has that element of transcendence, if you will, that we talk about often on this show, to change your perspective, looking at the world, particularly the Earth, in a different way. And that's what the Gaia effect is all about. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to continue with some allergy tips and foods you can use to boost the immune system. We've talked about astragalus root a lot on this show as being something which it's readily available in most pharmacies and certainly in your vitamin shops, as being something that, if you start early enough, can help you really boost your immune system enough so that you can interact with these particles, these allergens, and have an effective defense against them. Right now in my area, we have got huge amounts of tree pollen, and at this time of year, this is the big challenge for people who are allergy sufferers. But there's enough of it around that even if you have a little bit of sensitivity, there's so much tree pollen because of the warm weather that even just a little sensitivity, you will feel it. You'll feel it. So astragalus root is a good way to do it. We're going to talk about a couple other foods, including mushrooms, and the proper way to cook mushrooms, which is important. I learned some new things this week about cooking mushrooms, which is one of my favorite add-ons, if you will, vegetables, flavorings. But there are certain ways to get the best out of your mushrooms. My problem has always been that they spoil so quickly. So I learned some different ways of storing mushrooms that I didn't know about. So I will share that with you. But first I want to talk about the global warming aspect of what we had been talking about on Earth Day, because it's happening. And the more I look around to see how it's happening, it's really quite profound. And, well, the story that I came across this week is what's happening in Rockport, Missouri. Rockport, Missouri is a coastal town in that state. Well, it's more of a coastal town now because there were huge storms and huge amounts of flooding that took place. Now, this is not the first time it's happened in this town. And when the floods happen, it often takes out a lot of farmland and homes on those farmlands. And so they have to wait for the water to recede to then sort of regroup and repair and take care of any damage that has been happening. But this time is different because what's been realized is that these waters are not receding. So this area, this county in Missouri, has lost forever a good portion of farmland, and people have lost forever their homes. And it's because of the huge amount of flooding that took place, which has a direct connection to the effects of global warming. And if you go, and I'll post this YouTube video on my site, which is Metaphysical Media, if you, on Facebook, go to Facebook and just type in H. Wilkinson Media, and that will come up.